Yep. So next up is Jim McDonald and securing ENS deeds.
Do
you have any slides? Okay.
I can wave my hands a lot. There you go. Really quickly.
Do you want to stand or sit?
Stand. I might end up drawing all my handwriting. Perfect.
All right.
ENS.
Hang on.
ENS. So it's the
Say a couple of things.
Okay.
Excellent.
Fantastic.
You got us to 7 years.
I don't think I got us. I think it being a little bit later in the morning.
And tweets from like 3
Yeah,
people in the room with
I
70% following.
People are waking up.
I mean, 40,000 or so followers. They gotta get this one.
7 viewers, not 80. Because I retweeted this one. We're down to 6.
Oh, yeah.
Recording them.
Go,
Very
go,
good.
go.
Say that
again. We're back. Netflix. Right. Okay. So a lot of what I want to talk about fits in very much with some of the stuff that's been covered already this morning. I think fundamentally what we're looking at with ENS and what we heard very much from Piper is this idea of starting to get some more useful metadata into ENS. Use it not just as a resolution system, but as a discovery tool, and bringing more useful stuff available without having to worry about having locally coded information. I looked at the Mu GitHub yesterday, and a lot of the pull requests are, please add this token, please add this site, and all of that type of thing is great, but once it's done there, then of course we can't share it easily. So it's really looking at how we can do more of that. So specifically around looking at securing names and deeds as a result of that, there are 2 ways we can go. We can be functional and we can be advisory. So if we're functional, then we will block stuff that we don't like. And if we're advisory, then we can put up flags. So an example of the functional one is one that we covered earlier, just talking about this idea of saying, well, look, there's a limited number of ICOs at any one time. We can create a subdomain, and we will only allow one name within a certain level time distance to be available or resolvable at any one time. So that's a type of thing where it's focused, it's specialized, it's not going to sit in the root, of course, because that would be very, very complex to do and realistically impossible at this stage. But it gives us the additional ability to say we can have a subdomain of the world where we have different rules, and those rules imply certain levels of trust or certain levels of capability. When we're looking at a more generic, how do we sort of secure names, the obvious things we're worrying about, again, we're looking at phishing attacks and we're looking at homograph attacks and all that fun stuff. We're not going to manage functional blocking realistically, as we said. We have nothing in ENS that can stop someone from registering a homograph of an existing name. We work on name hashes. There are good reasons for that. I don't expect there's any suggestion to change that.
Not aware of.
No. So it's a situation that means that in terms of there, we'll never know about it until we find it. So the question is, can we do something on the advisory side at least that makes that a little bit better? So what we can do is we can have what basically comes down to a whitelist. So again, not for everything and not for all use cases, but for some certain use cases, we can start to look at whitelisting information. So we can have a system where, if we want to go away from the blockchain for a moment, where a company says, okay, I am Fred.eth, and I really want everyone to know that I'm Fred.eth. So I can go to a separate registrar and register using the name, not using the name hash, but using the name, which then allows, through oracles or through identity systems that already exist out there, we've got Status, we've got Aragon, so there's a bunch of ones that are out there that are potential. We can put some level of trusted verification that name maps to an external real world entity that we care about. The other problem that we've got is the user side problem. So Jared, we've been bouncing this around, and again, it's come up a lot, things like homograph attacks. What if someone cuts and pastes the wrong name into Mu? How do they know the fact that you've got like a weird S character in there that's actually the Cyrillic S rather than the Latin one? All of that type of thing. So what you've got again is an offline system. It's going to have to be off the blockchain just because of speed of responsiveness and complexity, where you can carry out a bunch of reductions. So you can look for homograph attacks, and you can go, look, this is a dodgy S character, we don't want it. We can look for, as we said, Levenstein distance for relatively larger strings. Obviously, small strings, it doesn't work so well. You can't do it very well for 5, 6 characters or less, because unfortunately, there are too many collisions to make it easily worthwhile. But if you get to larger names, or again, a restricted subdomain where you have that control to begin with, you've got more chance of mapping that too. There was one other thing that came up, which was an example of a name which is all in a single character set. So the example I picked was space. You can create the word space in Latin, you can create the word space in Cyrillic. They look exactly the same, they're both single script, but there's no way of being able to tell one from the other. So what you can do is you can also have reductions from non-Latin scripts back into Latin, where appropriate. You're not going to get Chinese to reduce to Latin. It doesn't happen, but that's okay. But you can do that for the obvious attacks, and again, then take your Latinized version and say, can we see if that exists inside the ENS space? And if it does, then we've got another situation where we've got an attack vector that we expect is going on. So the idea is to start to build up these layers. Once we've got the layers, and as we said, unfortunately for that side, it's advisory, we could turn it into a functional system. So say I want to register space.eth, forget the 7-character limitation. I can register space.eth, but then I can also send it to a trust system. That trust system can then look at it, carry out all of the checks that we need to carry out. Yes, you're all Latin characters. Yes, we're happy with it. If you want to do advanced stuff, like we said, if it's a corporate entity, we can check against registers and be that oracles or whatever it might be to do that. If it's an individual, we can check against U-board or status or whatever we've got out there that we can use to confirm this stuff. Once we've done that, we can build a secondary resolver. The idea of a secondary resolver is if I want to resolve space.eth. At the moment, as we said, there's not a lot we can do if someone puts a character or anything like that in on an individual basis. But what we can do is we can have a pre-registered space.trusteddomains.eth or whatever we want to call it, where all of that work has been done already in the background. So when someone says, I'm going to go to space.eth, we can also look at the namespace of space.mytrusteddomain.eth and get additional information out of it. This is where we get to the whitelisting side of things. And that allows us to have a higher level of trust that that name is valid, has been verified, is not the result of a spoof or similar. And if it's not in there, that gives us our positive, where we can turn around and go, well, actually, you're not there. So if it's space with Cyrillics, or if it's space that's all single script but maps back to a used Latin name, we can get the trust out of that side as well. Obviously, it has all the downsides of being a whitelist. If people aren't in it, they're automatically untrusted. There's a problem there, and there's not a simple way around that, because ENS is a system where you sign in, not everyone has an ENS domain to begin with, and we're going to have to realize that that's something we can do. But for the vast majority of entities that receive lots of ETH, lots of transactions, so pretty much any corporation running on there, active individuals running on there, it should be a relatively small setup process to get yourself on the whitelist. And at that stage, you can turn and go, yeah, we've got something up and running that we can use as moving from an advisory to a functional system, where, like we said, if you're not on the list, people can even say, well, I'm refusing to send money to this address because it's not recognized as a trusted address. So that's the basic idea. I didn't need a pen after all. Obviously, there's a lot of complexities and stuff in there, and this is something that I've played around with for no more than a couple of weeks. But it's starting to take form as something that can be useful. We have a whitelisting system that can already pick up, like we said, if you put space.eth in, it will flag it if it's an all Cyrillic name as actually being mapped to an all Latin name that exists in the trusted domain, which is just a testing at the moment.
Why does it matter that domains start as untrusted in these whitelists? Like, why is that a bad thing?
It's not a bad thing unless it becomes more of a norm that they should be trusted. At the moment, we're like, if we say untrusted is neutral and definitely bad is bad and definitely good is good, that's fine.
Yeah.
and if we reset the norm so that untrusted is actually, we don't like it, it might be harder to become a system where we force everyone to use it. Now, it's got pros and cons to do that, obviously.
So maybe instead of speaking of blacklist and whitelist, we should be thinking about categorization of things, right? Because the process of whitelisting a name is very similar to the process of blacklisting a name, the process of removing something from the blacklist. So I think that the ideal format we should have on the list would be not only a list of things, but a list and then a category saying this is a verified domain.
Verified.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And things, and even things like the reason on why, if it's a blacklist, if it's a bad thing, say why. Like this is probably he's a scam artist, or he's trying to be identified as someone else, because that also helps you if someone wants to remove from being a domain a name. When you try to identify as someone else, what's the word for it?
Impersonation.
Yes, it moves up in order for you to move from impersonator into a verified thing, you need to prove that, yeah, the domain has changed names. And I would even say that maybe you should add some categories there that can be personal choices of the users, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe one user wants to use the new decentralized web, but he doesn't want to find like black market sites, or he doesn't want to find some sort of porn site. And then you can have that category that just states, look, this is this type of site. It doesn't say that you should block it or you should allow it. It's just something that the user can choose.
Yep. And again, categorization. The other part of that is reputation systems, right? So we can allow other people to say if they believe the site is good or bad.
And this is also a way to reset that, like the untrusted thing initially. It's not like if there's no reason for them to be untrusted, it's literally like, it just looks like, I mean, the only reason I labeled this that is because of the fact that they don't have anything that's verified. There's no like there's nothing bad about them, but like anyone that you would look up that did have this reason that there's a problem or issue with that that's a little bit fishy, like you would know that and why. So you would just kind of expect that when you see a contract that's like has nothing, like no ad like thing telling you that this is a wrong address, you're like, okay, maybe this is a new address, like maybe, so it's kind of like leaves you with an open mind.
Sort of, because not verifying can also mean that if you're not verified, if you're not verified, you're okay, but if you're not verified and you're very closely similar to a verified name, then the client itself already like blocks it, right?
Yeah.
So the parallel here seems to be with Twitter's verified user type stuff.
Exactly.
Wait,
In the, like, if you go to real Donald Trump and you see the green tick next to it, then you know it's probably the real Donald Trump. No.
For my
This is even I'd also like to
saying how people are
we applied.
No, it's
Yeah, we applied, and then they literally just sent us their standard email that says, not even like we denied you, just like you're not eligible in the first place.
Not over enough. Right.
And then I was like, we have fishers after us, and they were like, silence.
we threatened by just putting down the dollar amounts and saying, okay, you'll be responsible for this $1 million.
We're doing that right now.
Like you gotta use the
No.
person that you're emailing.
No, we're like literally right now. Otherwise, got like 4 fake Twitter accounts. So that's what we're trying to get to right now. Like Twitter doesn't give a crap.
The categorization.
I also have problems with that whole verified badge thing. Like,
Yeah,
So
I
I
think that I learned is that like if you have a verified thing, your replies are more likely to end up at the top than the others. And that is like that gives you more problems than the just verification. General verification, it does prevent impersonation.
But then it's about why you
that's
do
why I
it,
kind of not
right?
so against it, right? Because the impersonation is for real.
So I'd like to point out that historically, voluntary categorization systems like Mark Your Site as Adult have been quite unsuccessful. Even though adult sites nominally have an incentive to do this because they have no interest in attracting underage users, they don't have credit cards and can't pay for porn.
They don't make their money by repelling kids.
Yeah, exactly. So, but they although they nominally have some incentive to do this, in practice, the diversity of systems for this and the low incentive for them to put the effort in has resulted in very low participation. I think Twitter is different, for instance, because there is an immediate and visible result to the user for verifying themselves, although obviously the system is somewhat broken.
And that's one of the things that we're going to have to do. If we want a system like this to work, whatever it may be, we're going to need buy-in from the major wallet providers and everyone else, so we can actually have something we do. So yes, that means it's going to be another EIP, and we'll write it all up and see if we get a standard and move it along.
You have to mitigate against like reputational attacks through categorization and stuff like that, because it's used all the time.
We've been talking about this internally a lot in terms of how can we enable the user to, when they type in an address or an ENS name or anything on the site, to quickly verify that this is like the right address or like the address that they're looking for, to be objective about it. And we've talked with Etherscan as well about, you know, what are some steps that we can take integrating with their API or whatever, to basically like show it useful information, or, you know, would it be, I was like, would it be worthwhile to just like throw like some sort of like comments thing or whatever up there for people to comment and
corporate logos, things like that. Again, it's like the pipe saying, right? More metadata in there. If we can attach more information to not any name, of course, because then we're back to the same problem. This is why we need a subdomain, or we need something out there that acts as a more trustworthy source that has some kind of gatewaying.
Yeah, that's
exactly.
tokens. Push tokens on saying they solve exactly this problem.
Tokens will help, yes.
Yeah.
Actually, I think that we have a pattern that we see in a lot of things that is basically stake bet with tokens, and I think that can be a very useful pattern. If you put a lot of your reputation at bet, right, saying that this is an adult site or this is an impersonator.
Right.
It doesn't have to be money. Like maybe
And
there's you verify
that's the
that.
thing, is that if you make it easy enough,
More like the process for burning that block.
That's what I mean. By verify that it wasn't a good lift.
right, so if we
Well,
make it
there are
easy enough,
things that are reasonably provable with simple.
well,
We're trusting something oracleized based.
Then why do you need to
Because we don't necessarily need to force people to go through the entire verification process for all of these.
So show me how it works. You want to say that a site is a phishing site.
No, I want to show that I am Hypermarian on GitHub.
And you stake some tokens for that?
I could either go through the verification process, or I could just have my reputation up at stake.
Yeah, like other people know who he
And
is
it's
and will.
really trivial to burn my reputation
Is it?
by somebody else paying the gas to unverify me using the Oracle.
Right. What's it cost to do?
How does the Oracle work?
He's saying that the Oracle is involved or expensive, but you can basically just make an assertion and provide a bounty for anyone who can disprove it.
The GitHub one's
the Oracle is one checks the
the GitHub one's a bad example because frankly, you would just have everybody actually go through the verification process for GitHub.
Right.
But for other things it may be. We're theoretically
But the point is that it's a true bit pattern, right? It doesn't matter if the actual process is expensive, but if the process is truthworthy enough, then people won't need to use it because they can just bet on the outcome of the process.
Yeah.
Even if the process is expensive.
let's have like a prediction market reputation system for every address. Right?
What's the worst that could happen?
Yeah. We won't ever have to use it because people will know that it'll resolve correctly and therefore never make bad registrations.
That's gonna be perfect in practice.
Okay, so real quick, we talked about pie in the sky, sort of like what we could get to with this, but from day zero, there are things that could be verified.
So very, very quickly, the advisory system obviously is a fair bit easier. So for example, I got a web service up and running where you can currently feed it a name that will be an email address, and it will it will tell you if there's mixed characters, if the name does map to something that is in the same space, but like I say, with Latin and stuff like that. So that on the advisory level, there is a functional level to what I think you're after, right? Where you can actually have more of a guarantee on the chain that something has been verified to a point, so you can trust it implicitly on the chain without having to go anywhere else.
Sure. That's the hope is.
So in our discussions over email, you talked about also ways for people to assert that changes won't happen, that that you lock down what a name resolves to or who owns a name, so that any changes will be flagged.
So the use case of that is that someone gets access to your ENS name in some way, shape, or form. So I got an address and I got a name, it points to my good address. Somehow, some way, shape, or form that gets hacked and that address changes. So your resolution is different, which is again another one of those use cases. If a user who at the trusted level can assert they're not going to change it. Again, let's take an ICO as an example. I'm not going to change my address for the next 3 weeks. That's where it's going. If someone then manages to hack into the ENS owner and change the resolution, we can flag that and go, oh, it's changed and it wasn't meant to. So we're back to metadata and a separate side source. So in this case, we'll say, my favorite ICO.eth, we expect that address to stay exactly the same as whatever this address currently is for the next 3 weeks. If that doesn't happen, we can immediately flag it. I mean, there are simple things as well, like reverse resolution, right? We can say, I got Fred.eth, which resolves to a name, but when I reverse resolve it, it doesn't resolve to Fred.eth, or it resolves to, nasty hacker.eth or whatever it might be.
Yeah,
but the point is if it doesn't resolve back to your proper name, and if you can't then go through the loop again, so you can actually go around twice just to make sure, you can see again there are potential issues there.
How do you handle it? So that makes a lot of sense, except for when domains change hands. How do you handle that in that kind of system?
The idea would be that you would set up your information beforehand. So you would say my address is not changing for 3 weeks.
Okay,
so you wouldn't say I'm never going to change this.
What if I say my address isn't going to change for 2 years?
You've made your address worth a lot less.
Yeah, well, or you've decided that you're going to have it for 2 years. Like the amazing thing about this is you cannot do this with regular domains.
No, but what I'm getting at is that while a Fisher can then release the name, they can make it unverifiable. I'm looking at ways that you can abuse the system to trash domain names.
You mean I haven't set this up and then someone hacks the name, sets it to their address and commits to it for 1,000 years?
Yeah.
So that would be one shitty way. But moreover, I was thinking if somebody just buys a name and once they get it and they start going to try to verify it, somebody else verified it for the next 3 years.
Okay, but the point there is to start with, when you first try to do your verification, obviously step one is there's a name that resolves to an address, so you make sure that you've got the key to that address.
Exactly.
That's step one.
My interpretation of what he was talking is that this is more like something that it's more like a promise. I promise not to change his address in the next 3 weeks. It's not that the name cannot be changed. It's just that if it's changed, some red flag will be set up, and they say, "Wait, that's weird. He promised he wouldn't. He did."
Yeah, and this probably applies
will never be changed.
So in my imagination, like how this would be like really useful in my Ether wallet isn't necessarily like this like super black and white world where like if you promise you won't change the address and it changes, then we just like shut everything down. It would be more useful as like,
big red warnings. Right?
Yeah, so like,
this
address promised that they weren't gonna change their thing, and then it changed 2 days ago. You might wanna go like do some further research or like take a second look.
And now that I've thought through it in that context, I think it's fine. There's probably an upper bound that you wanna set on how long you can promise, and also it's probably not a big deal because it really is only likely gonna apply to ICOs, businesses, and exchanges, and things like that who are accepting money.
Well, we would hope over time we're going to see a lot more people on Ethereum with accepting money as corporations or.
I'm talking about like the lay person, like a
like your average user probably isn't gonna go and verify their address because they don't really have like that many people sending to them. But
It's
like
more like it doesn't matter as much.
yeah. But like if you're an ICO, for example, I mean we saw like just I don't even like how much you guys are aware of like the scam shit in Ethereum right now, but like CoinDash, like their website got hacked. Or hacked, I don't know. Whatever. I don't know what happened, it doesn't matter. An address was posted on the CoinDash website that said, hey, our ICO started, send out your money to this address. They got $7 million in 2 hours from 1,000 unique addresses. Okay? And the best part about all this is that was not a contract. Okay, that was a regular freaking address. So like my initial reaction to that is like, wow, well, we should probably freaking verify if like an ICO address is a contract on my Ether wallet to like warn people. But then you get back to it, it's like the chicken and egg problem. How do you know what an ICO
You don't know what
address
they're
is?
sending it to, right?
Right, so like, you know,
Well, the answer to that is to use a trusted subdomain.
exactly.
And
So
this is the general
this
thing. We want to start getting people to use ENS in general, not just because it's easier and we like
It
typing
allows
in names.
things like
It
this.
gives us a lot more options for security.
Exactly.
And I'm
then you can
assuming
get
that
state
this
approval
is
for
not the only functionality of this. Like locking up your account is one thing you can do. Like, but like say like any everyday user, they decide they want to do X thing with their contract and like, you know, either lock it up or be like in this many days, let it go. Like there could be a lot of things that someone wants to do with this functionality. It doesn't have to be locking it up. Locking it up would be great for ICOs, of course. But like, say I want an address to use for something specific and I want to let go of it right away so I can money back. Like I literally set it up to, you know, be this amount of time and then release. Like, you know, that would be a cool functionality for a different use case.
I mean, that's the thing, is like we can go all the way down the rabbit hole with these types of things. Like, so I'm gonna ask this, is like what in the short term, what are the plans, or like what are the next steps, or like realistically, what is the timeline for this sort of system?
So I've been playing around with it for a couple of weeks. I have an advisory system up and running, like I said, so you can feed it a name, it'll tell you if it thinks it's suspicious and why it thinks it's suspicious. So it looks for homograph. It doesn't do event time distances against the netgate because that requires me to getting more names out. But we have that level of system. The interesting one, like we say, is the one that's more on-chain. And the big issue with that is a question of how do we fund that? How do we run an external service? How do we trust the external service? Should we not use an external service as much as stick on-chain and use, you know, our add-ons and statuses and everyone else there who's already doing identity management? So the biggest outstanding part is where do we believe we should get our trust from? And again, I would say, is it a reputation system? Is it a staking system? Do we trust other people's reputation systems? How do we do that? And that's the one that, again, there's 5-10 different solutions out there. And one of the things I'd love to have known is if people kind of start to try and gravitate toward either one of them or have a standard for being able to talk across them and see if we can get details from there.
Well,
That's
so
the biggest blocker.
do you know like what the status of the reputation systems are in the whole ecosystem?
It's pretty minimal, and like it's such a huge open problem.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like in terms of what we will probably end up doing, it is essentially staking some tokens. And say, for example, this sort of GitHub thing, it's probably a little more clear in terms of what we do because you'll have to stake your reputation to enter a group chat, for example. And then if the participants in that group chat, you basically, when you join that, you're basically saying to people who are already in that chat that they can then
behave.
Yes, exactly. And I can take it away.
At the risk of my reputation.
Okay.
So, but I mean, we're purposely leaving it quite open.
Reputation from participation in that chat room?
Sorry?
Do they also say gain reputation?
We left it quite open yet, so like that is not a solved problem. Still thinking about it.
Cool. So here's a tip. If you can have some proportion of the reputation, like some identities of some portion of the reputation, give reputation to someone outside of that group, then you're vulnerable to support attacks with that amount of reputation.
Right.
So Cory Doctorow has an interesting book called Walk Away, where he basically has the thesis that he calls them reputational dystopias, and the idea that every reputation system will be gamed in order to maximize its its self-stated goals, and that those it's effectively impossible to line those up with what you actually want out of the system, and eventually they just degrade into gaming the system.
Yeah.
And you're trying to get to the top of the scoreboard, even if it's
Absolutely.
nice.
So here's the question.
It's a good
If the
point.
choice is, you know, I mean, so right now, we already kind of have that with like capitalism in some form, with politics in some form, with media in another form. There's also different areas of life that have different kind of fitness functions and different selection pressures, where people are pushed to do kind of different types of things by different standards, and they game their incentives, and then things degrade in a certain way. And then the thing that happens is like, oh, you get this unfortunate thing called, I call it corruption. And when you like use one system to make progress in the other, and vice versa. And so somehow, okay, we have more of these systems, maybe we can experiment more with incentive systems and get more diversity of types of failures. But also more opportunities to like game the systems across each other.
I kind of think that's sort of his thesis in that if you have one reputation system with one objective function, everyone knows that they can try and do to maximize that objective function. But the ultimate informal society thing is that every one of us is running a meta reputation system for everyone around us, but we all have different objective functions. So it's difficult to devise one strategy that impresses everybody.
Exactly.
So this is real life also.
Yes, and it's also how viruses spread through population.
Right.
I think there's an episode of Black Mirror like that.
And that is a reputation for dystopia.
I just like bought the
Both provide reputation and reputation according to different standards.
Yeah.
Within the same framework.
Yeah, in the same framework.
That's all right, yeah.
So we're running up against time again. I mean, the obvious example, the obvious thing we can do is to sidestep the problem and use traditional reputation systems. We can push a thing off chain and we can say, okay, you're saying on Microsoft.eth, and that's great. We're actually going to go and verify by phoning you up or getting a common breadstream, or whatever we can use in the traditional world was good enough for them, was good enough for us, until we either see if we've got oracles or reputation systems or identity systems out there that we're happy enough with, or we can use in tandem. Like we said, if every identity or if every reputation system has an objective goal, and that's fine, maybe we can use 3, 4, 5 of them with conflicting goals to give us an overall idea of the reputation outside of the gaming of the system. Maybe not, it just becomes a meta game, but that's okay too, because we need something that we can do that's a lot better than where we are now.
Right.
So that's one of the things that I'll be looking at over the next couple of weeks to get an idea of what the solutions are out there, if there's something that's worthwhile doing. And it could be a choice. There's no reason why we can't have a name that's trusted by you guys and not by you guys.
Right, and so that's one thing I just want to say is like, typically when we think about like reputation systems or identity systems or like, verified systems or blacklists or whatever, we're talking about like basically telling the user whether something is like green or red, like good, bad, harmful, like beneficial, whatever. Like we're basically like making a subjective opinionated thing and like in this subjective world and like putting it into the user's head. But the other option is that everything is rather neutral and you provide additional information that's tied to it. So this is one thing that we did with like myetherwallet.eth is like, when we decided the language about talking about how we're gonna say that, instead of trying to solve the problem of how do we like, what is myetherwallet, like, in this like, how do we verify that? What information do we ask for? We use all the system. We're like, okay, the one thing, like the factual objective, like fact is that like myetherwallet.com, right? The website you're on right now, myetherwallet.com, does not have control of myetherwallet.eth. And then you just display that message and the user can then use their own subjective decision-making and rational skills and whatever to be like, okay, maybe the thing is like, maybe there's myetherwallet.eth in the future is like some, beneficial, like, I don't know, like something, and like you do have a reason that you would want to send that money. But you also would want to be informed that it's not myetherwallet.com.
And that's where a verification system is different from a reputation system. Right. We can verify that myetherwallet.eth is owned by Freddy Hacker Dog, whatever, yeah?
Right.
So, and then that may or may not, that's not a value judgment, that's a statement that gives you additional information that people can then choose
Right.
to decide on what they want to do with that.
And so like with ICOs, a similar thing may be like, okay, like it may be enough to say this address is, we verify that this address or this ENS name is, you know, controlled by this Twitter account and this .com. And that may be enough, like without being like, you know, a huge big thing, like it may be enough to just verify like one thing, provide that additional information to the user, and, you know, let the user then decide what they think of that and whether that's a positive thing or a negative thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you can pretty easily incorporate that into like the like warning framework. Like, so yes, you have this, you can choose to verify, or like you will get warned based on other people's input, like consensus on who's interacted with that address and not screwed for their money, like, you know, things like that. And you can actually, like, basically we'll give you two different forms, and you kind of make it so that there's not like a one. People would look at many different aspects of everything, every domain before they like interacted with it. It wouldn't be like, oh, this one thing is this, I'm either not going to use it or I trust it now. So we kind of give people a reason to kind of more.
And equally, it depends where you come from. If you come from Twitter, and I've been on Twitter, I've seen something, type in, go to this address. If I go over and go in there and it says, okay, yeah, this relates, you know, what the address I've typed in relates to that, I feel better that the information that's coming from here is the same as the people who own that address. Now, you know, they might still be hackers. So again, that's well, we're back to the difference between verification and reputation. Yeah. But you know, yeah, we can do that. And as you said, you know, we can get enough data points for people to make a better and more informed decision. And as we said, you know, we can use more stuff, like we said, we unlock the address for X amount of time or whatever it might be, that gives people really good red flags when we think things are starting to go a bit wrong. Mm-hmm. That's the idea.
Very nice.
Good idea.